Amidst all of the excitement surrounding West Ham at the moment, let's be honest, there's a fair bit of it, isn't there? I mean, my word, what a start to the season it's been. And it's just a joy, isn't it? When things are going well. And of course, we've got the excitement of new arrivals and the players seem to be settling in well. It's just a lot to be happy about at the moment, a lot to be excited about when it comes to West Ham. But on the other side, in terms of, transfer window does mean, of course, there's the possibility of departures. Now, there's been a couple of names that have been talked about a fair bit in terms of possibly leaving the club. Fringe players that have been described by X and through sort of like top sources at West Ham that they're possibly looking to let go to free up space to bring other players in. So you kind of do understand it. But I'll go through them in a minute. But I want to talk about Max Cornet in particular because that's a name that's sort of come out quickly today. And I'll be honest, it hasn't really taken me by surprise. It's almost as if like it's taken quite a while for this to happen. I'm quite surprised it's taken this long because despite Cornet clearly being he's a decent player. I'm not knocking the player at all, but it hasn't really worked out for him at West Ham at the moment anyway. I know you could turn around and say, well, he's had bad injury, and that is true. And that's typical, isn't it, for West Ham for a new signing to get injured early on. But you do look at Cornet and I do feel like he's had enough opportunity as well. It's not as if he's just been out of injury and he's just come back. He's had quite a fair bit of time as well. And I think it's quite obvious he's not overly favoured or trusted possibly. And it is a shame. It is a big shame when you kind of feel that because for me personally, and I'm sure others do feel the same, that when he joined the club, I was quite excited by Cornet. I do think, wow, we've picked up a real gem here. Did so well at Burnley, great goal scoring record. And I just felt that what a smart signing it was, but it just feels like it isn't working one way or another. And because when he does get his opportunities, I'm just not blown away. I don't really see enough of him to think, do you know what? He's pushing for a starting place. I'm just struggled to see it. So it's no surprise. And for me personally, as sad as it is, it's always never nice to see a player depart that, probably a little bit hasn't fulfilled what they intended to do or you expected them to. But at the same time, it probably wouldn't bother me too much. If it meant that we're going to free up some space in the squad to add to it, Cornet kind of makes sense. And bearing in mind as well, because of his age and who he is, etc., you kind of think you probably could get a decent fee for him. Now, X has listed 3 clubs that are apparently very keen on him. Burnley, of course, his former club, the club that he joined West Ham from. Makes sense. Absolutely makes sense. They'd be interested in him. I mean, he's got the experience, he knows the club, and the fact that they're going to be in a season where you'd imagine they're going to be struggling to survive in the Premier League. Not struggling, but you know what I mean. They're probably going to be in and amongst it in terms of the relegation battles this season. So it would absolutely make sense for them to be interested. Nottingham Forest also apparently are keen on the player. I mean, they've survived last season. It was quite tough for them. I think they're going to be in probably for another little bit tough season. However, I've got to say, a bit of a side note, I do quite impressed with Forest, what I've seen of them so far. They actually seem to be putting up a bit of a fight and playing quite well. So, yeah, that's interesting. And you think that side, the Steve Cooper's way he sets up, I think Cornet would fit that quite well, actually. But, yeah, so they're interested. But the big club that are keen, that are very, very keen, apparently, are Everton. Sean Dyche, of course, worked with Cornet at Burnley. So he has the player he understands. He has the system he understands. There's a bit of trust there. So that would, for me, if you're Cornet and another club, that would probably be the better suited. But, Everton, let's be honest, are in big trouble. And they're going to need additional players because, my word, they do need it. Because I don't think they've even scored a goal this season, have they? I think probably bottom of the league with no goals, something like that. So, yeah, real struggle for them at the moment. But, yeah, Max Cornet, I mean, it's a sad one, isn't it? It's a sad one. You look at it and think, I really, when he joined the club, I really felt that we'd picked up a gem and found a wise move there from West Ham. I thought it was a clever signing, but it just hasn't really worked out. You get the feeling if he hadn't been injured the way he was, that things could have been very different for him. And it could still be. It's not to say West Ham career is over. Of course it's not. And he may not even go. But it just feels like a bit of the writing's on the wall for me. That the Cornet's time's probably coming to an end, or that the club are probably going to try and palm him off now because it's an expensive player in terms of wages. I believe it's not a cheap option to have, and if he's not really firing and bearing in mind he has had an opportunity at West Ham, it's not as if he's just been injured and come straight back in. He has had opportunity, and I've just not been blown away by him. Not been blown away, and I'll tell you one thing as well. I did kind of pick up on, which is. And I feel like I'm calling the player out here, which I'm not. I don't want to be like that. But one part I didn't like was the aspect which is quite commonly known, which Burnley fans advised, and exes advised, is that he's one of those players, if he gets a slight issue injury-wise, he doesn't want to play, he kind of doesn't, so, and that kind of find can be a bit frustrating because you just want to get him going. But look, it is what it is. Burnley, Everton and Forest all very interested in him. It wouldn't surprise me if he departs. Whether it be on a loan option to buy, I don't know. I don't know for detail of it at the moment, but there's certainly interest there. And let's be honest, as I've said, with those clubs, it all makes sense. You kind of think, yeah, you can see why they'd be interested. And you can kind of see why West Ham would probably be interested in moving on, especially if we've got other players coming in, as we've talked about in previous videos. The interesting part of this is that regarding Cornet, is that the reason these conversations have started is because West Ham have been in dialogue with Everton over Danny Ings. So Everton have approached, I believe, West Ham regarding Ings and wanting to bring him on. I think West Ham have actually been rather open to that discussion. But it appears that Danny Ings himself actually doesn't want the move. As turned around and said, actually, I want to stay at West Ham. I want to fight for my place. It's a tricky one, isn't it? Very tricky. A part of you's like, I commend that. I like that. Yeah, great. He wants to stay at West Ham. He wants to fight for his place. That's what we want to hear, because that's the passion you want, isn't it, to play at West Ham? But then on the flip side, you're like, he's one of the highest earners. Doesn't really fit the system. You struggle where he's going to fit in. It's all a little bit, I'm not sure. But I will say about Danny Ings as well. I mean, I'm not knocking the guy because he's great. He's obviously a good player. But I like the fact as well that he clearly is a very popular character at the club. I think he's a big voice behind the scenes, which I think needs to be taken into account as well. Whether he will move on, I'm not sure. You kind of get the feeling that if these, I'm talking about Cornet and Ings here, there'd be last minute, deals in the transfer window. You get that feeling they could fall into that category. I also want to talk about two more players as well. The first one being Kurt Zouma. So there's a lot of talk going around at the moment that Saudi Arabia Saudi clubs are showing a big interest in Zouma and could be making a move for him. Look, I mean, it's not what we want to hear. That is not what we want to hear. But I've got to be honest. This is just, I'm just taking this for a total. I mean, I'll tell you what. I'll tell you what Exa said first. Exa said it's unlikely. Exa already said it's unlikely that would be allowed to happen, which is, let's be honest, it kind of completely makes sense. As if West Ham are going to want to be entertaining a deal to sell our, newly appointed captain. It appears he's going to be our captain, doesn't it? I don't know if it's officially announced, but I think that's going to be the case. It would be very strange, and it seems a player that's very happy. Look, money talks though. That is the big worry there, because if they turn around and say, "Well, I'll tell you what, we'll offer you 750 grand a week," it's unlikely not to turn his head a little bit. But you'd think with what West Ham have offered him in terms, but don't forget he's our top earner, I believe, Zouma. So you've got big wages he earns at West Ham. He's on a long-term deal, London, which he knows very well. He's captain of the club. And bearing in mind, West Ham stood by him firmly with this situation he had last year with the cat and what have you. So you do think with all those factors put in, I can't see the player then suddenly demanding to leave. It just doesn't feel right. So I'm with X on this. I'm glad to hear X say that it's an unlikely one. So I don't think it's one we need to particularly worry about. Of course, things can change, but I think at this stage, I don't think West Ham needs to be too concerned over Zouma possibly departing. The last one, this is the sad one. This is the real sad one, and I know that a lot of fans are going to feel this. And I'd like to know your thoughts on all of these. What your thoughts are in terms of players departing, which ones you'd like to see go, etc., etc. And the players obviously I'm mentioning here, but Pablo Fornals heavily linked with a move. He's been linked really throughout, and again, it makes sense as to why he is, because he's not a first team player. He is always. I do really feel for Fornals, because although he has been on the bench quite a fair bit, when he comes on, he's been doing a great job, and I actually think he's a valuable squad player, really do. And he's so embraced the East End, isn't he? And West Ham fans love him, and he's just a player I don't want to see leave. I really don't. I do not want to see Fornals depart the club, but it doesn't surprise me he's being heavily linked. Now, at the moment, again, Saudi clubs apparently are keen looking at him, and also some teams from Spain. I'd really hope that Fornals is not a player that we would consider selling, unless, of course, it's a huge offer, then you kind of understand. But I actually think he's a valuable squad member. One, again, like I was saying regarding Ings, I think a very popular one. I don't know if you've seen it, but there's a video on the official social media for the club, and it was the players arriving for training. And they sort of do this game where they give them a question and something to ask as they walk in. And Pablo Fornals, you have to watch it. Go and have a look if you haven't seen it. And I think it's a desert island question, like who would you take on a desert island with you? And Fornals is just brilliant. His sense of humour is great. He's just you look at him and think, wow, like he's a really good lad. And I personally would be absolutely gutted to see him go. I really would. And yeah, that's the one that would hurt. But how sure he's going to go, I'm not sure. I still think he's a valuable member of David Moyes' team. I don't think he's a player that they'd want to particularly offload unless absolutely necessary. But Cornet, though, on the other hand, I can see happening. I really can. I would not be surprised. Sad, yeah, it would be. It'd be not sad, probably disappointing. Probably a bit of a disappointing one because you think of what the promise that he had coming into the club. But I'll tell you one thing is going to be for certain. The next few days are going to be bloody interesting at West Ham.